Opinionated. Today's topic is encryption. And this second part of episode 3, we got Jeff Beckett here at the studio, our guest. And he is a senior security advisor, or consultant, rather, advisor. Before we go into the interview with Jeff, I have to say thank you for our sponsors. We got sponsors today and every day, and one of our major sponsors is Masilamony. Then the second one is the First Nations Homeless Project. The third one is the Institute of Social Justice and Human Rights. And don't forget, the last but not least, CBF. So Jeff, how do you get into security?
It was an interesting journey for me, but it's all about being able to understand how people do information, how use information, and how they sort of protect themselves. I think that was the topics that started coming up that got me most interested. So,
are you a mathematician, Jeff? You got mathematical background?
I like to think I'm a bit analytical in the way that I think.
Analytical, yes.
But no, I did okay in my engineering studies a long time ago at university, but no, I wouldn't.
Not specialised mathematician?
Not really, no.
But as I heard that everywhere, encryption is based on very strong mathematical logic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how can you work in the encryption security industry without that very strong?
I think it's a matter of understanding a little bit about how these mechanisms work, but as a learned gentleman said a few moments ago, it's always best to get someone else, the experts, to actually do encryption. It's not something that you do yourself. You rely on those that do have those very, very specialist skills to be able to do it for you. It's not something you whip up yourself in your kitchen.
Not, but some nations doing it almost daily. So who is the strongest with security encryption?
Well,
which nations?
I think there's a number of them that do very well. Certainly, historically, the Russians have always had such a strong mathematical background and area. It's an area of great strength for them.
Science and mathematics.
Indeed. But encryption's not new. We've had encryption for thousands of years. The Romans.
Tell me, which was one of the first inscription? Obviously, before the Romans, the Egyptians with hieroglyphs.
Indeed. Encryption is all about being able to protect our information and having some control over who gets to access it.
So how the Romans done it?
The Romans had what they call the Caesar cipher. So they would substitute characters. So a lot of children now, in children's puzzle books and so on, they might have the word hello, and they'll have what we call a substitution cipher, where they will move the 8th letter of the character H, and let's go back 3 steps, and so we'll use the 5th letter of the alphabet E, and I substitute each of my letters in. That's what the Romans did thousands of years ago to protect their military communications, and really things have evolved since then.
Yes, and what's happened after? So what's happening today with the encryptions?
Today I think there's encryptions around us in nearly everything that we do. So when I go and do my internet banking and I get my little green padlock on my internet browser, that helps me understand that yes, I am talking to my bank. Or encryption is on my phone. If I have to type in that 6-digit passcode to get into my phone before I use it, that's there to help protect the information that's on my phone if it gets lost or stolen, just like the last speaker was talking about with the Apple and
the
FBI
golden
case.
key.
And the golden key.
And the FBI, of course.
Well, law enforcement have got a very big role to play in some of these areas. A lot of us have a view that we want our privacy. Our privacy, absolutely. But
and
we want to be protected.
Freedom of speech as well. I heard that before.
All of these things are all under threat, aren't they? As an individual, I really want the government to go and stop terrorists from perpetrating their attacks. So I'm interested in law enforcement stopping some of these terrible crimes that go on. But at some stage, I need to start thinking, well, actually, where does my privacy start to take importance? And at what level of appetite do I have for others to interfere with what we're doing?
So where is the line in the sand?
I think the line moves. I don't think the line is consistent anywhere. It's a matter of, it's an appetite thing, isn't it? It's what kind of things we come up with simple examples like the terrorist cases and child pornography and all of these terrible things where absolutely we're very happy for the instruments around us to have control over that. But at what stage am I no longer comfortable?
They don't really have the control over it because it's still on, big time, both of it.
Indeed.
So where this can end, so how can we trust that the surveillance on us every day, 24/7, is really brings the fruit to combat the terrorism or the other non-lawful computer activities?
It's an interesting question, isn't it? I heard this morning Theresa May speaking in the UK about the various plots that had been intercepted, and clearly those kinds of areas are positions where the citizens are very comfortable for the governments to take control. But you were speaking about smart homes beforehand. You know, do we really want to ask Alexa, is Google spying on me? At what stage, where do we draw the line from an individual perspective and a society perspective as to just how much of this surveillance we're prepared to accept?
We don't know. But your area, as a security advisor, what sort of client are you working with? Here in Perth, I work with lots of different companies. I work with small companies, 100, 200 people, operations, all the way up to large corporates and insurance companies and government agencies around the country. And so many of the themes that come out, though, are consistent. There's a risk appetite. Nothing can be completely secure. If we're talking about computers and IT, if I turn the machine off, if I encase it in concrete so that nobody can access it, then I may well have a secure system, but is it something that I can use? So we have to balance out usability and security. If I make your phone so secure that the FBI can't hack into it, if I make it so secure that your communications are always protected, will you always be able to use it? Some people, when they use their thumbprint to go and unlock their phone, or their Face ID to unlock their phone, these things are a balance of usability and security. If I want my phone to be able to unlock when it's sitting on the desk, and I don't have to be sitting directly over it, well then maybe I run the risk of someone who happens to look like me, my brother, my twin, can also access that information as well. So we're in a constant state of balance, and it's understanding what our risk appetite might be and where we choose to draw that line, and the fact that the line is not always in the same place. On that note, Jeff, I would like to ask our director to play in a video clip, which is entitled End of the End of Encryption. Can we do that? Direction?
So, Harry, the Home Office says it's irresponsible to have these kind of services where no one can get in there, end-to-end encryption. Do you agree?
The fact is it's not even possible to prevent end-to-end encryption. It is a technology that exists now. It's not just in WhatsApp, it's in Telegram, it's in Signal, it's in a number of messaging communications, and you can't prevent it. What could the government do? They could potentially demand access to some of the metadata behind it, but I don't think there is a way, literally, that they could.
This is the so-called backdoor.
Exactly. I mean, there isn't really a way to have backdoor access to end-to-end encryption, because the key changes every message. It's a choice. You have to find another way of accessing it, and that would be potentially through accessing the phone or accessing, as I say, the metadata that Facebook would have, but that would only tell you who the person has messaged at a certain time.
Right, so the way into it then necessarily, I mean, the WikiLeaks revelations, for example, revealed that the CIA can already intercept devices before a message has even gone on to WhatsApp. So if they can do it, why can't the UK intelligence services?
Well, look, they may be doing it. There are ways to hack into phones, and you know, hacking is an arms race, right? So obviously phones are now the key means of communication, and hackers are finding ways to sort of access people's phones. So if they can do it, so can the security services. So yes, if you can access your phone, if I can access your phone from GCHQ, potentially sort of hack into it, then I'd be able to see the messages because they're in the phone, they haven't been encrypted at that point.
Wouldn't find much on mine. My wife telling me what to bring home from the shops tonight, mainly. But this backdoor thing, I mean, what's the risk there? Potentially, if there is a backdoor, then the likes of the Russians or the Chinese or anyone else could hack into it as well.
Exactly. I mean, you know, we're in an arms race. If you open backdoors, then you're just giving a backdoor to much more sophisticated hackers. This is a multi-billion-dollar hacking industry, and we would be making ourselves much more vulnerable.
So what would be the consequences then if Amber Rudd gets her way? Presumably WhatsApp and Facebook become a whole lot less investable.
I mean, honestly, I don't see that happening. I mean, clearly, if there were terrorists worried about that, then they would just switch to another messaging application, so it would have very little tangible benefit in terms of fighting terrorism. For the users of Facebook and WhatsApp, frankly, knowing that all your messages could be read by Facebook, which is what you'd have to do if you ended end-to-end encryption, that's not very comfortable either, because how are they using those messages to target me?
Notwithstanding that, though, Harry, I mean, the optics of this are pretty terrible for Facebook, aren't they? Yet again, I mean, they're not a company with a good image at the best of times, but I mean, this looks like they're putting the nation's security at risk almost.
I think, look, they're providing a messaging platform that's used by 1 billion people. Some of those messages are good, some are ill. I mean, do we ban the telephone because the telephone is being used as part of terrorism? I'm afraid terrorism is, it was horrible what happened last week, and I cycle over Westminster Bridge every morning, and, so it's very close to home. But at the same time, I cycled over this morning, and, it's a risk that I'm afraid we have to take. I'd much rather run that risk than have, effectively, people sort of spying on me.
All right, Harry Briggs from BGF Ventures. Good to see you. Thanks for coming in.
So, Jeff, end-to-end is encryption. Can we end encryption ever?
I don't think so. I think we will have to come up with new techniques, new ways of doing things. It's a cat and mouse game. We started off a long time ago with what we thought was a reasonable level of encryption, and keys become weaker. The ability to brute force or just guess what those numbers, we assume that numbers are random in many of our encryption algorithms, and that's not always completely the case. Sometimes the algorithm, the mechanism they use to encrypt information, that might have been compromised. There might be ways to get around that. So whether it's new encryption techniques or whether it's other approaches that start to be taken, I think encryption will always be with us. We will always have a need to control who gets to access our information. The ways that we do it might change.
Yes, I heard something about ending encryption. That's supercomputers. Is that true or possible?
I think there's a lot of advancement and so much research that happens in those areas, and things like quantum cryptography and a number of different areas. But I think these are always an adversarial game. There is always two sides to every story. So when one side makes a massive advancement, what we've seen throughout history is that the other side catches up. Sometimes there might be a gap, there might be a lead time, there might be an occasion where one particular, the ability to encrypt information is beaten by the ability to decrypt information. Something that used to take... Exactly, something that used to take 50 years to encrypt, or sorry, to decrypt.
To decrypt, yes.
We thought that's fine. No one is going to have the time or the resource or the effort to be able to do that. But then a new advancement, a new technique, a new mechanism is found, and all of a sudden what used to be an unreasonable period of time, 50 years, no one could ever do it, that massively comes down. So we have to find new, different ways of approaching it. But I don't think we'll ever lose encryption. There's always this cat and mouse game.
So, Jeff, that sounds to me, encryption protects privacy, protects the businesses, protects the government, protects anyone and everyone who got big money. It's like law. You have money for QCs, you can go to the Supreme Court, you can go to the whichever court you want because you got the money. So you probably win at the end of the day. But how can we, and what can you tell as a message for winding up this discussion for the people who are watching us and they not have lots of money, how can they protect themselves? Any free softwares what they can use to encrypt their telephone conversation, their emails? Any advice?
There's a few techniques that you can use. So there are apps on your phone. So even things like iMessage and WhatsApp and those kinds of very widely used capabilities, a lot of them already have end-to-end encryption built into them. There's an app called Signal, which is open source and is fantastic for that kind of capability. The other advice I'd give to people is to take some steps. So something is better than nothing. If you have a computer at home, you can encrypt that computer so that if someone breaks into your house and physically steals that computer, your information is still protected on there. So my first advice would be do something. Something is going to be better than nothing. And there's a lot of different approaches it can take. Yes, some cost money, many of them don't, but taking some action is absolutely better than taking no action at all.
What is your nightmare about encryption? After that many years.
My nightmare? Well, I think my nightmare is that the race isn't level anymore. That one side is so far massively in front of the other that the game is essentially over until we find a recovery. I'd hate to sit at home and transfer money to pay a bill and my neighbour is able to see all of that information go through and change it and redirect it. That's my nightmare. But at the moment, we like to think that the race is still fairly level.
And what about the crypto money?
Cryptocurrency is a fascinating topic, isn't it? It's there's a lot of, there's so much hype at the moment around things like Bitcoin and the massive increases this year in particular.
In value.
In value, indeed. I can remember in June it was like $2,000 and I think it's up over 11 or 12,000 now.
But how the security of those currencies are going?
Well,
I heard that they're more secure than anything else, more secure than even the bank transactions.
Well, there's the cryptocurrency, we can almost call it a revolution. There's a capability underneath the things of Bitcoin called blockchain, which is actually something that could revolutionise the way we do business. One day, we might not need a bank because we have this blockchain mechanism, which is really a distributed ledger. Everybody will know exactly what's happened and not be able to change those things. I don't have to go to a bank to go and say, here's $100 and then they give me $100 back and I rely on them keeping those records. So I think the cryptocurrency side of things, whilst we hear about Bitcoin and massive amounts of money and so on, I think there's going to be some really interesting things that happen over the next 5 to 10 years.
But it's all based on encryption.
It's the fundamental underlying capacity that gives us trust in all of these things is encryption.
So that's the good news for ending this part of the story. Please don't go away, stay with us, because after the break we're coming back with much more, with 2 more guests on the topic of encryption.